Welcome to our first edition of Track Announcer's Notebook for the year 2021. I hope you've all had a great New Year's and Christmas holidays, and we're optimistically charging in to the new year. Lots to cover tonight. We have Phil Mahood of the Vincent Owners Club and the VRRA and other various hats in motorcycling that he has worn over the years. Because tonight, for the most part, and we'll get to Nodell's notes when Stuart's able to join us, but tonight we're going to celebrate the passing just after Christmas of two gentlemen who were so much a part of the motorcycle racing scene, particularly in the classic and vintage era, but they were certainly prominent in their heyday. And we're going to talk about Ross Thompson, and we're also going to talk about Dennis Curtis, who sadly are no longer with us. Phil Mahood has joined us, and Phil, it must have been a shock when you heard right after the Christmas holidays the passing of Dennis Curtis and Ross Thompson. You put out a nice tribute to both of those gentlemen online and on the newsletter that goes out to the Vincent Owners Club members. So let's start with Ross, who was known as an amazing fabricator and restorer. He had the magic hands when it came to restoring old motorcycle tanks and fenders and all those bits. What can you tell us about Ross Thompson?
Oh, yeah, Ross is a sort of a linchpin in the whole vintage restoration movement in Canada, and I dare say around the world. He was known for his skills in the sheet metal repair arena. He's pictured here with his lovely wife, Sonia, who supported him all the way. Ross lived in Nairn, Ontario, which is northwest of London, and he built a business. Basically, his fame really was in being able to restore gas tanks for vintage motorcycles and other sheet metal, whether it was fenders or whatever. And he had the magic. He could repair almost anything. A fender that was just shot full of rust holes, seams falling apart, seemingly mission impossible kinds of things, but rare parts that could not be replaced. As a last resort, folks all over the world would send these broken, twisted, and rusted pieces to Ross, and he would make them whole again and allow for essentially the recreation and restoration of dozens, if not hundreds, of vintage motorcycles around the world. His skills would be called old world and old school. His loss on December 28th, creates a huge hole in that whole continuum of restoring antique motorcycles. He was only 70 years of age, in excellent health. He and his wife enjoyed daily morning walks, and all the folks in the village of Nairn loved to see them. And he suffered a heart attack, quite out of the blue, no warning whatsoever. The man was the picture of health, as you can see from this picture. There he is with his Norton 99 Special, which, by the way, aside from helping other people create world-class restorations, he did this for himself, and his personal machine there actually won second place at the 2017 Cobble Beach Concours, which was the greatest assemblage of restorations ever produced in Canada.
And
So
Phil, just so folks know, Cobble Beach is really one of the premier concours. Not only motorcycles, but some incredible automobiles show up at Cobble Beach there at what is a golf course, and they park their machines using a couple of the fairways there.
yeah,
Pretty
it's
amazing
very
event.
comparable to uh, Carmel, California.
Monterey, yep.
Yep, that kind of concourse. In fact, physically a very similar site on a golf course with an ocean background on Georgian Bay in this case. By the way, just on the right there is a picture of Ross's work along with the paint work of John Connery. That is one of Ross's last pieces. Again, a lost cause tank for a 1949 Vincent, which is proudly going to be going on my personal machine. And it is, I think, the last of Ross's restorations, and obviously now a special treasure for me.
And Phil, you mentioned John Connery. I've known John Connery with Connery Custom Paints, who was sort of the other half of the restoration of these tanks, where Ross would do all the tough work, getting it looking like new, and then John, who is one of the most respected custom painters, would do his magic, and lo and behold, you have a piece that looks brand new there. And I've known John for a long time. I knew his brother, Dave Connery, who sadly passed away a number of years ago now. He was an excellent motorcycle drag racer. And John Connery was kind enough to send me a few thoughts on Ross that I'd like to share with everybody who has joined us tonight. A few words about Ross's work. The last 10 years, I've been painting a lot of Vincent tanks. All of them were done by Ross, and they would come to me looking like new in bare metal. I just primed and painted them. No filler or putty needed. These 70-year-old original tanks were usually a mess when he started, often bent, rusted, dented, and full of bad welds and bad bodywork. He made a special jig so the mounts would be true and everything aligned, and then went to work metal finishing all his repairs. A true craftsman, he was the guy if you wanted a tank done right, and often the only one who could restore a tank to take chrome. His reputation was well known all over the world, as such that the Barber Museum was sending him work. I really don't know of anyone else that can do that caliber of work on motorcycle parts anywhere. I recently did a vintage mini bike that he repaired. I thought they were new parts. He was that good. Sadly, we will miss him, John Connery. So some kind words there from John, who that mini bike probably the last piece that he will get to paint. But as you said, he was part of the dynamic duo of Ross Thompson and John Connery, who created some of these masterpieces that went on some of these bills. Go ahead, Phil.
Yeah, frankly, I don't know what we're going to do now. It so happens that in terms of Vincent tanks, and I can't speak for other brands, but we now appear to have some replicas being created that are accurate, and perhaps that's just in time, because there is no substitute, there is no alternative to Ross Thompson in the world right now.
Yeah, Phil, you certainly can't create somebody who was really the Picasso or replace somebody like that. Were the skills and the techniques and the meticulous work that Ross did, was any of that passed on to a student or somebody he was mentoring?
That's a very good question. And the answer is a simple no. I often fantasized about the idea of, asking Ross if he would let me work with him for 2 or 3 months, and I would just go and spend my time free with him and try to ask him to pass whatever he knew on to me, because that's how important his skills were. Um, that never happened, and no, he worked alone, and this is it.
We'll see what fills what is a certainly a big void right now. Stuart, have we got any other photos before we sort of roll the tape back and start at the top with our Nodell's notes?
No, I don't have any other photos of Mr. Thompson, but I can go back to the beginning if you like, and also just to let you know, Peter Shepard is now on the call with us, so
Okay,
I can
great.
convert him over to a panelist as well.
Okay, so let's go back to the top, and then we'll get to Peter Shepard, more with Phil Moed, as we look back on the life of Dennis Curtis.
Yeah, thanks, Pat. So I know you and I had spoken earlier in the week, and we wanted to come up with a new fun segment. So we're going to come up with my first motorcycle. So this is the first motorcycle I ever owned, and it's a 1979 Suzuki JR50, and this is what I started my motorcycle racing career on at about the age of 6. And the funny story behind the bike I got was it was purchased from a store called Motorcycle City that was at the north part of Toronto around Yonge and Steeles, across from the old Town and Country Mall. And it was, one of the owners was John Daly, famous sidecar racer.
Yeah, John and Arthur Daly ran into them a few years ago. They actually came out to Canadian Tire Motorsport Park when we had one of our motorcycle road racers reunion events. But they were a pretty solid sidecar team back in the mid 70s, raced all over North America. Sadly, another one of the motorcycle shops in the Toronto area that is no longer. So Stuart, a little 50cc at 6. Well, I was a little bit older than that. I was actually 16 when I took my life savings down to McBride Cycle, another motorcycle store that's no longer around. And for $499, I got this beautiful Ducati 160 Monza, 160cc, 4-stroke, obviously, drum brakes, 4-speed transmission. And yes, back when you're 16, you'll do crazy things like try to ride your motorcycle in the snow. I did that a little bit, but that was for, I had that for a few years and then moved on to my next bike. But you always remember your first motorcycle and your first love. So those on our webcast tonight, if you'd like to email Stuart or myself, we'll give you the email addresses, and send us your picture of your first motorcycle each week. We're going to select one and have you share the story of that very first motorcycle.
Awesome. And with, we also were talking this time of year, most of us are used to going to the motorcycle shows. And I know we had some conversation with Nathan Naslin. He had also shared some photography of some shows from years past. And I know a lot of people are missing going to the shows. It's a great time to catch up with people you haven't seen for a while. And I know as a former racer, it was often an opportunity to meet sponsors or help existing sponsors with some of their, they may have had a booth and you had to help them sell whatever accessories and products. So it was always a great opportunity. And actually, Pat, when I think back to it was about 2002, I did receive one of those Max Awards for our result from the 2002 250 race at Daytona, where I finished 9th. And I think you presented the award to me as the International Rider of the Year. So I have fond memories of that.
Yeah, I've been complaining to lots of people in emails and in telephone conversations, I think, going back to before Christmas, that the first weekend in January is going to seem very, very strange, because for over 4 decades now. I always headed to the International Center, either in the early years just to check out the show, and then later on, Bar Hodgson and Peter Daly running the Super Show, and we would be busy doing and emceeing the Max Awards and the Show Bike Awards. That show, of course, a number of years ago sold to Marketer Shows, but it's just one this year that is not going to happen, at least in the early part of the year. This same weekend coming up, the Power Sports Services groups that puts on the Manufacturers Show, they were scheduled to kick off in Calgary, then move on to Edmonton and Vancouver. And then, of course, that show would come back east and run at Quebec City, Toronto later in February, and then wrap up in Montreal just before we headed to Daytona. So it's a new year, 2021, but no motorcycle shows for us to visit here in the Toronto area. So we'll just have to deal with that.
And this was also sent in from Nathan Naslund earlier.
And this is going way back. This is the Edmonton show when he had his dealership out there, Redline Motorcycles. And here you can see the motorcycles look vintage, but a motorcycle show is a motorcycle show. And there will be none, at least through the first part of 2021.
Then this was another photo Nathan showed us, and that's him in the brown suit.
Yeah, I think again. So there is one motorcycle show still on the schedule. That is the Spring Motorcycle Show that Peter Daly and Bar Hodgson and Haiti Hodgson puts on. Sadly, in 2020, they were not able to do that show. It is still scheduled for April 10th and 11th. As of today, the show is still officially on the schedule. It's really going to depend in the next 60 days what happens in terms of the surge in COVID cases, how quickly the vaccine can get out, as to whether or not the regulations and the restrictions will change where they can even think that a motorcycle show, having it at the International Center, will be permitted. So all we can do is hope that this could happen, but at this point, I think it's a very, very long shot.
I did get some good news earlier this week, Pat. Jeff Williams sent me a text, and this is him riding his ice bike.
Oh my God. This is just months after that horrific crash at Turn 4 at Canadian Tire Motorsport Park.
Yeah, so I think it's safe to say he's well on his way to recovery.
Right. So we'll check in with Jeff a little bit later on. I know initially he was talking about maybe getting into car racing with the Radical Cup class, but I know his recovery and his return to health has certainly been miraculous, and wouldn't be surprised if we see him at some point in 2021.
Yeah, Pat. And then we also received a notice earlier this week, late last week, from Tony Sharpless. And what she's doing is she's actually putting together the racing classes and rule structure for her series, the Canadian Mini Superbike Championship. So she's asking people, if you want to have a say and input into the classes, reach out to them by January 18th. She sent a whole spreadsheet of the various classes and breakdowns. So the best thing to do, I would say, is go online to supersonicschool.com and reach out to Tony and share any thoughts that you might have.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Tony, who's been around motorcycling and motorcycle racing for a long, long time, reaching out to the mini bike racing community and others who might be interested in racing the Ovale class or any of the other many classes. Have a look at that document, have a look at the rules and regulations, and give your input, because they're going to be finalizing those rules. And we'll have Tony on a future show to talk more about the Supersonic Road Race School and the schedule once that's firmed up for 2021. And then as well, the Canadian mini SBK, the mini Superbike series that will be the starting ground for our future road racing stars.
And then the other piece of news I've been following a little bit, Pat, is the Marc Marquez story. And it sounds like they've had a third surgery on his arm back the first week of December. And there was proof that there was infection in the bone that they had repaired. However, he could still be having a lengthy recovery, and he's not a guarantee to start for the year. And it could be up to at least 6 months is some of the rumors. So there's a good chance former Honda rider and now Honda test rider Andrea Dovizioso may fill that seat for the beginning of the season at Qatar at the end of March.
Yeah, interesting. All the race schedules have pretty much been posted, certainly the big international ones. But I think, Stuart, we're going to be looking at a situation where nothing is carved in stone. We're going to see changes. Just today was reading an article where right now even Formula One, that has a very aggressive 23 race schedule, is looking at the fact that they may not be able to start the F1 season in Australia. It'll really depend. I think the next 60 days are going to be crucial as to whether many of our racing series, whether it's car or motorcycle, are able to start as scheduled in 2021. And speaking of that, I did speak to Kevin Elliott earlier today regarding Daytona. There are two schedules out there. Both have a Daytona 200 scheduled. The one would have the Daytona 200 going in the afternoon, as was the case in 2019 when Kyle Wyman won the race, with no Daytona TT, and then the other one having the Daytona TT running on Saturday night, March the 13th. If it's only road racing inside the speedway, then American Flat Track would go back and run on the short track that was built many years ago outside of turns 1 and 2. So we'll update you on the situation. And Kevin did reiterate that he has put up $1,000 bonus for the highest finishing Canadian rider. Alex Coelho is confirmed he's going to be there. I believe Darren James is going to be there. Pat Barnes, maybe you can tell us your current status. I think you weren't going, but we'll see. And then we'll see if any other Canadian riders do post an entry. They would have to probably fly there and ship their equipment down to Daytona. Again, that runs March 12, 13, 14 with the Daytona 200 on March the 13th.
Yeah, Pat, I did have a quick conversation with Pat Barnes earlier today, and he confirmed he's doing the lightweight. He's got the Kawasaki 400. He won't be going to Daytona this year, but maybe 2022. He wants to make sure he doesn't want to make the commitment and have the rug pulled out from underneath him again. So I think he's going to wait it out until it's safe to do so, 100%.
Okay, a domestic series for Mr. Barnes.
Yeah. Then we've had Cameron Cycles had a change of ownership. We learned earlier today.
Yeah, and the brothers selling that dealership after over 40 years. I think 48 or 49 years, Cameron Cycles. So certainly the landscape in terms of dealers in Toronto and Southern Ontario has changed drastically over the last 10 to 15 years. And this is just the latest news that came out on top of the closing or the sale of a number of Harley-Davidson stores last fall.
Yeah, and then we have another dealership that was an automotive dealership that's, I guess, handing over or giving up the motorcycle power sports division of their retail store.
Yeah, Bob Redinger, of course, who has been a Honda car dealer for about 48 years, got into the power sport business a number of years ago, multi-lines, and he's decided to move on from that. I think most of the motorcycles are gone. I think they still have some remaining parts, accessories, and maybe a few used and current motorcycles still to go, but they'll be wrapping things up there very, very shortly. Bob Redinger, a strong supporter of motorcycling. I know he was one of the top fundraisers for many years with the Bad Ride, and a great gentleman. We wish him well as he focuses now on the Honda car store.
Yeah, Pat, I think the one thing we can say for sure is we've talked to a number of people over the past number of weeks, and we always go back to people that were motorcycle enthusiasts first, passionate about motorcycles, and there seems to be a real changing of the guard that a lot of these longtime dealerships and motorcycle enthusiasts are leaving the industry or retiring. So I'll skip through those two, and that really brings us back to the late Dennis Curtis.
Yeah, another great loss for motorcycling. I've spoken to a number of people who were certainly impacted by the passing of Denis Curtis again just after the Christmas holidays. And I got to bring Phil Mahood back in. Phil, you knew Denis very, very well. He was part of the VRRA for a long time. He was a member of the Vincent Owners Club, and a gentleman who lived his entire life in motorcycling, starting back to his youth in England, where I think he did some road racing in his early years on a BSA Gold Star 350 at his local track there at Cadwell Park. But it was really once he got into designing and building racing frames and other motorcycle components that his career really took off, and then of course immigrated to Canada in 1970.
Yes, Pat. Denis really is a very unusual personality in the Canadian motorcycle sports world, because he was far more well known outside of Canada than right here at home. He's emigrated from the UK in 1971, so he had been here almost 50 years, and he is his métier really was building frames and special motorcycles. He is in the great tradition of the Harris frame, Drixton, Fritz Egley from Switzerland, Colin Seeley, Bomoda even, Ken Sprayson, and many, many others. And it could be argued, though, that Denis was perhaps more successful and effective than all of them. And the reason I make that point is that his work is being used in anger on tracks around the world today, and very effectively in winning. He really became the go-to guy for people in the vintage road racing and classic road racing field who were dedicated simply to winning. Denis's work was effective and impeccable. This picture here shows a small piece of his work. It's an upper frame member, tubular cage frame for a Vincent, and this was commissioned by Bar Hodgson for a special motorcycle that is still under construction. Could I have another slide, Stuart? The next one. Yeah. Okay, we missed it. Anyway, Denis started his career. No, back.
This one here?
No, before that, if there is one. No. Okay. Let's just go on to number 10 then. Okay. Yeah, Denis began his road racing career brief in 1965, racing a BSA Gold Star DVD 34 at Cadwell Park, a very small club track in the UK. And very quickly he found that, his real calling was in building special frames. And this that we're seeing right now is his first creation. It's called the Curtis Vincent, and it was a successful machine, raced by another rider. This is, someone much faster than Denis, campaigned it for many, many years. And this particular machine generated a demand for copies. A lot of people wanted one of these. And one of those that was created, next slide, please, has ended up in the collection of Jay Leno. And this is it here. It is a Vincent engine with a Norton AMC gearbox. Now, Jay, I know personally. I have ridden this particular motorcycle. Jay is not a fan of specials and custom bikes, but he made an exception in this case because this particular motorcycle really looks like a true factory effort. It looks and has a togetherness about it like a true factory effort. So, Jay lifted the bar and had to have this one in his collection. There we are. That's Denis on his very first road racing adventure at Cadwell Park.
And that's the BSA 350.
Yes.
Yeah, that Curtis Vincent that we saw with the English rider there on number 10. What size displacement Vincent was that motor?
That was a V-twin, 998 cc's, 1,000 cc's.
And what kind of horsepower were they pumping out back in the day, Phil?
65 or 70.
That's pretty decent.
Sounds very modest, but it went rather well.
So now we move on to some of his other creations.
Yeah, we're going to jump decades forward here, and this is Denis's shop in Trenton, Ontario. Denis and his wife, live in Belleville, but his shop is in Trenton. And here is, an example of his current work. He has become a master, really, at building frames that tamed very large engines, like Suzuki 1100s, and more currently, he's been taming Yamaha FJR 1250 cc bikes and making them into effective road racers. This has become a bit of a thing. I want to just stop at this shot for one reason, and that's to say that, Denis's wife, Lindy, has just announced to me today that she and his shop partner, Byron Cox, intend to continue the business for at least the next 6 months. They have enough, at least that much work left, and they will continue beyond, if there are orders. And so that was nice news to hear today.
And Phil, this motorcycle that we're looking at, I don't know if it's one of the bikes that actually raced back in January at Phillip Island before COVID-19 arrived. But David Crussell, who I know through the American Historic Racing Motorcycle Association, he has been heading up the U.S. team, and our own Jordan Zoke was invited to ride with the likes of Josh Hayes and Larry Pegram that made up about a 7 or 8 rider American team to race against the Aussies and the Brits and the New Zealand riders. And these are pretty awesome motorcycles. And I did have a brief conversation with Jordan Zoke today, and he was very impressed with this motorcycle. But the other story that Jordan related to me is that Jonathan Cornwell with Oleans had been working very closely with Denis Curtis on developing and modifying the frame. always looking for that bike that's a little better handling. And so some of the feedback that Jonathan and Jordan had given to Denis went into the further refinements that they were making to these chassis that'll house a Yamaha FJ 1250. But from what Jordan tells me, it's not 1250, it's more like 13 or 1400. So a lot of horsepower. And he said these bikes are only 3 or 4 seconds off what a modern day super bike is running. So we'll see what happens. There, of course, is no Phillip Island Classic Invitational this year, but they are planning for 2022. Jordan's hoping to go back and ride. And then this is a story we'll follow up on, is that Scotty Miller is building a bike for 2022 that supposedly Steve Crevier will be riding. But I think with the success that they had in January, I think Jordan had 3 top 10 finishes and an 11th in the 4 races they had. Josh Hayes won one of the races on one of these Curtis Yamahas. So definitely a motorcycle frame that is very, very competitive. And I think based on what Cornwell and Zoke and others were talking to Denis about, this is going to be even better come 2022.
Yes, could I just have the next couple of slides and I'll show you what I mean by this and amplify your remarks. That particular motorcycle was on the stand. That's raced by Jorge Guerrero here. This is him in practice. Shows you these are serious people here. Next slide, please. This is actually Colin Edwards. And the Team USA has some of the best riders in the world. Josh Hayes won a race there in 2019. The team has also had names like Jake Zemke, 4-time AMA champion, Colin Edwards, 2-time World Superbike champion, Jason Pridmore, World Endurance champion, etc., etc. The format of the Island Classic is it's country against country. There are teams from the US, Great Britain, Australia, and New Zealand, and they compete in the teams compete in a points race for a championship. And it is considered to be the best of sort of post-classic racing in the world, second only to the Isle of Man Manx TT. Top line racing, and you know, Denis's work is out there on the track, winning today, and that's my tribute to him. And this is outstanding. Let's say a man really not known very well in Canada. Perhaps Peter Shepard, who is on the call, may want to add to this.
Yeah, I'm not sure if we've got video of Peter Stewart, if we got a technical issue there, but Peter, can you at least hear us?
I can hear you.
Okay, well, we can hear you just fine. Peter, Phil has taken through us through a great deal of what Denis has been doing, particularly more recently, his early years. But I know when he first moved out to British Columbia, his shop out there was right opposite Fred Daly Imports, that at the time was the Yamaha distributor. And Denis actually, this is a shot of the American squad in Australia, but Denis was doing some work for Fred Daly and the Yamaha, including building some of those lowboy frames that Steve Baker even ran.
That is correct. He talked to me a little bit about that. Denis was a born entrepreneur as well. Don't forget, he had a wheel company, right? He ran a wheel company out there.
He's making mag wheels. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And I think he worked, I believe, with Tom Folds in some capacity at Honda at one point too. Maybe it was in the car side, because Tom probably was in different areas. But so he knew Tom when he came to VRA.
Right. And what was Denis's involvement with VRRA? Because I think at one point both Denis and yourself were living in North Bay.
That's great. That's where I met Denis in North Bay. And he was at the time in a car dealership. I met through Max Burns, who you probably remember from Cycle
Yep.
Canada. And because of our common interest in motorcycles, common experience in England with apprenticeships, we both did apprenticeships there, that we became good friends. He moved away eventually to Belleville, and I came to Belleville only some years later. But as far as the VRA is concerned, he got involved with us with racing, and he also became, when I was president in 2003 and 4, he was my vice president, and he did an excellent job revamping the club magazine. And because of Denis' salesmanship and attitude, he found sponsors for us from various companies locally, and did a really good job supporting it, and also did some racing as well. He raced a RD 350, I think, for a short time, but he did have a rather serious accident. His wife didn't want him to race anymore after that.
Yeah,
So,
building frames is far safer.
exactly, and he was so enthusiastic about getting into that business. Something that always really impressed me was his constant enthusiasm and positiveness about making it a success. It was a bit of a struggle initially, and obviously, like starting any business, it's never easy. But he's become a worldwide known person now. He's selling in the EU, New Zealand, Australia, the States, Canada, and a number of other countries that we don't hear about very much.
Peter, did Denis ever talk to you about a future project or something he had thought about in terms of maybe something that was a little bit radical in terms of frame design and something that was on the back burner and maybe on the drawing board, but he never got an opportunity to, make it a reality?
One of the things he did do, he rubber mounted engines in several frames. I think they were in the 3-cylinder 2-strokes, and also in a straight enough 350 Honda frame. I know that a couple of these bikes are around, but not many. One of the fellows who bought one raced it very successfully in California, in the series down there. And the guy was winning races regularly on a 350 Honda. And he said the rubber mounting made a huge difference to how the bike worked. And I can understand that because I used to race one of those myself. So I know what they're like. They used to vibrate like mad. Anyway, one of the things that was in his mind was to go back into building flat track bikes, because he really liked doing that kind of stuff. And he did some of that while he was in BC, I believe. And he wanted to get back into doing some flat track stuff, but he wanted to aim for the high level flat tracking. That was his goal.
Yeah,
and I don't know how far he got developing it.
Yeah, and he also dabbled, I think, a little bit with some motocross frames and even some street bikes as well.
Well, yeah, sometimes people would bring in, well, the VRA guys often rode, stock bikes they modified for racing, and they'd bring them to Denis to improve the frame a little bit, stiffen it up, and make it stronger and that kind of thing. And sometimes someone wanted a street bike as a custom machine to drive on the street. He would build them for them. I didn't do a lot of those, but I saw several through his shops because I used to visit him quite regularly at his shop.
Yeah.
And we go out to lunch together and took chinwag.
Yeah. Earlier, Phil mentioned that the company is going to continue at least for the next 6 months. I wouldn't be surprised if some potential buyers, come out of the woodwork in the months to come, because it seems like things were really starting to take off for Denis with all the chassis that Dave Krussell and others were ordering. I think, even having to deal with COVID, I'm sure business has been good if they've got 6 months of work still to do with any new orders coming in. What do you see as the future of the company?
I know that I'm going to have the discussion probably with Lindy Curtis soon, because she asked me if we'd have a discussion about the company and anything we can do to help. I know that they had orders on the books. I don't know how long for. They also have some stock frames, you know, for like TZ350s and things like that on hand, which they can sell. Byron knows how to produce all the existing frames on the existing jigs because he can do all that work, no problem at all. Denis was a designer, you have to remember. So if there's anything new, that's where Byron can't really do that without Denis's guidance. Because Denis designed all the modifications to the frames. If people wanted a slightly different engine mount or some other variation, different engine in the same frame kind of thing, there were changes to the jigs and changes had to be made accurately. So that was always an issue, and it could be an issue in future. But Byron can do all the work that he's done before. Plus, he's a brilliant maker of aluminum products like aluminum tanks, seats, and I've watched him produce those very complicated two-stroke exhaust systems, and he does a fabulous job on this kind of work. So I know that side of it can continue. It's a question of if there is a buyer in the woodwork. I know Denis had talked to some people about this at some point, but I don't think it ever came to a conclusion. And partly that was because of COVID.
Yeah. Peter, I mentioned a little bit earlier, Jonathan Cornwell
Yes.
of Olean's working closely with Denis, and Jordan Zoke providing some very good feedback after riding the bike back in January. Did Denis talk about that and what areas of the frame design they were specifically working on?
I know they did some changes to the tanks so the guys could lean further forward over the tanks and get the weight further forward when they were cornering, because you know nowadays they hang a long way off the bikes.
Yeah.
And they needed that room to be able to do that. So those kind of modifications were done. John Cornwell had helped him a lot with the suspension, because they used to measure every millimeter of suspension travel to improve how it all worked with the suspension units that they were using. And they spent a lot of time on that. And there's a fellow they know, and I can't remember his name, but he has software that helps develop all this kind of stuff accurately, because you can't just do it with a slide rule, unfortunately, these days. You need a computer. And, you know, but John has been very helpful to Denis, and they work together very closely.
Yeah, indeed. So it'll be interesting to see what the next rendition of the frame looks like, carrying these big 1300cc motors. I'm going to check in with Stuart Nodell. Stuart, have we got any questions, comments that have come in on the Q&A? And for those who are with us this evening, if you've got a comment or a question for Peter Shepard or for Phil Mahood about either Ross Thompson or Dennis Curtis, feel free to jump on there and ask us that question or make your comment. Stuart?
Thanks, Pat. I think really the only comment is that I'm seeing is, you know, it appears that Denis wasn't recognized locally. And I know Phil had mentioned it earlier, and I was thinking the same thing, that he's obviously internationally renowned, and just not enough people here locally seem to be familiar with his work. Obviously, he's incredibly talented building these beautiful chassis, and they're very successful, and he's had a great history in the sport of motorcycle racing, and not just road racing and flat track motocross, as it was just alluded to by Peter. And we actually do have Dave Crusoe on the call, so I don't know if he's available to talk, if he has video. If he can maybe type into the Q&A section, we could maybe bring him into the call as well, since he has most recently worked alongside building the bikes.
Okay.
Denis did sponsor some riders, don't forget, for the VRA. This was direct sponsorship. He provided them frames and other things to get them going. So they were local people. But in Canada, we don't have the sort of interest in motorcycle racing that they have in Europe or in Australia, and therefore it's much harder to get people to accept something new like that, and what Denis was doing.
And Peter, I was in conversation with Phil Mahood over the weekend, and I said to Phil, I knew of Denis. I didn't know him really well, but certainly someone should nominate him for induction into the Canadian Motorcycle Hall of Fame. That ceremony, of course, was postponed from this past fall. It's in Quebec in Montreal this coming fall. Hopefully that can happen. So for 2022, still lots of time for somebody to nominate Denis, and just looking at his work that he's done over the years and for the longevity of his career, he would certainly be, I would think, worthy of being in the Canadian Motorcycle Hall of Fame. Phil Mahood, are you still with us? Your thoughts?
Yes, I am. Stuart, my video has gone off for some reason, but can you hear me?
Yeah, we see your smiling face and we can hear you. The photo. Your high school photo is up on the screen.
Oh, yes. That was taken a little while ago. True enough. I try to put my best foot forward. Anyway, final thoughts. Yeah, Denis is an obvious choice. Perhaps
Agreed.
I could talk to you later about the process for making that nomination.
Yeah, happy to help you with that, Phil.
I'd be glad to do that.
And while we've got you, I know the VRRA has come out with a schedule. What is your hope for vintage racing in 2021?
Were you talking to me or
Phil,
Phil?
well, both.
Oh, okay. Well, I will. I hope I'll be volunteering again this year if they're running races, and I enjoy being there when they do that. I don't do as much now. I'm 82 years old, so I'm not exactly a youngster anymore. So, but I like to participate, and you get to know a lot of friends there. So I'm hoping they will run their schedule. So far, it's iffy, but it's already in print, so they're hoping to do it.
And Peter, maybe it's a little bit too early, but do you think the VRA would look at some kind of a year-end award under the name of the Denis Curtis Memorial Award that would go to maybe more toward a builder or possibly a rider running some very special equipment?
I would think so. I mean, I've supported various things like that before, and I certainly would in Denis's case. I'll talk to the president. Our new president is an old friend, and I'll talk to her about it and see if we can get something started.
Before we go to Phil Mahood, Stuart, I think you may have a couple of other comments on the Q&A.
I do, Pat. I'll just read here from Nathan Naslund because he's written about a paragraph here. It's just that he first met Denis in the mid-1970s while racing at Westwood, and back then Denis's frames were highly sought after. And as much as Nathan would have liked one, it just wasn't in the budget, the story of many of us poor racers. However, the frames that he made back then were for current bikes. And now with the popularity of vintage racing, those frames have found a new market with modern techniques that Denis incorporated. He reconnected with Denis when he moved back here to Ontario, and it was when he the VRRA as the vice president. He wanted to make the VRRA race at most for a bigger event, and asked Nathan about bringing the demo rides from when Nathan was at Suzuki, and it turned out to be a successful venture for both the VRRA and Suzuki. Yeah. And as they continued the relationship with the VRRA for a number of years, now Nathan lives not far from Belleville himself. He would connect with Denis from time to time in recent years, and he's very sorry to hear of the news of Denis's passing.
Yeah, there's a group of us often meet on Saturday mornings, motorcyclists. We get together just for a chinwag. Normally during the summer, we ride our bikes somewhere to a coffee shop in chinwag. And Nathan used to join us quite a lot. And several guys who race with the VRA, some guys from the CBMG. And Denis never used to join us because he said, "Oh, there's too much conversation." And when I talked to him on a one-to-one basis, his interest was he was very concentrated on his business and all the ideas he had to grow it and change it and so on. So that's what often our conversations were about, and about life in general, And of course, when he became sick, unfortunately, I used to be a sounding board for him to tell me what was going on and why it was happening and so on. And it was a very unfortunate time, but I will miss him terribly because he was a very good friend.
Yeah, I think all of motorcycle and motorcycle racing has lost a good friend. Phil Mahood, as you look ahead to 2021. Some big losses there for the Vincent Owners Club with the passing of Dennis Curtis and Ross Thompson.
Yeah, I don't know what to say. I was devastated by the news. It was a double whammy there at the end of the year, and I'm grieving like all the other gentlemen mentioned this evening and who are in attendance, friends. Um, but we're looking forward. We're coming out, and I think that the memories that are left by these two gentlemen, can never be replaced, and we'll live on. I'm starting to smile more. I'm hoping that the 2020 is the worst year that I will ever experience, and that there's great things to look forward to. Dennis, by the way, in my tribute to him, I'll just echo something that Peter said. He was incredibly focused on his business and his work. We found that he's a nice gentleman and very, very social. He was a personal support to me during my own illness. Wonderful, caring gentleman, but he was totally focused on his work. And I would try very hard to get him to come out to some Vincent events, which we held right there next door to him in Belleville. And it was hard to get him to come out, even for half an hour. He was he just put in endless hours. He was so enthused about what he was doing. I would say the same thing for Ross Thompson, always in the shop.
Doing what they loved.
Yep. So they were examples to us all, and he's an inspiration to me, both gentlemen to me today, and I'm going to work harder, even though I'm getting on in age. I'm getting back in the shop.
Okay. And Peter, what about you? What any projects this winter?
I'm working on a 1967 175 Honda that I got as a basket case and gradually piecing it all together. So I'm not doing a lot, but I was going to say one other thing. I didn't know Ross Thompson, but I understand that he was a class fabricator and worker. And I have a feeling that Byron Cox, Dennis's helper, assistant, almost son, he has that kind of skill too. So I'm hoping that some of the loss that people appear having because of Ross Thompson disappearing, that Byron will be able to do some of that work to help people out, because I've seen some of his work and he certainly does superb work.
Stuart and Odell, we got a couple of more questions or comments before we wrap up.
We do. We have one come in from Matthew Gill of Motorworks, and he just wanted to say that both Dennis and Ross were a huge inspiration to him, but and to the whole entire, not just in Canada, the motorcycling community, but worldwide. So they were both his heroes, and they're sadly going to be missed. They're really missed.
Yeah.
So Peter Shepard, I want to thank you and Phil Mahood for coming on and sharing your thoughts about two motorcyclists that we will dearly miss. Peter Shepard, we wish you all the best with your project, and Phil, getting back into the shop even more. Ross Thompson and Dennis Curtis, their last rides here on December the 28th. Our condolences to their families and their friends in the motorcycling world. Stuart, we're going to send it to you for our final thoughts.
Yeah, Pat, thanks. It was, I have to say, it was quite interesting getting to learn a little bit about both of these guys. Me being much younger, obviously, and I wasn't really a bike builder, but more of just a rider. But I echo your sentiments about the Motorcycle Hall of Fame. I'm actually quite surprised that they're not already there. So hopefully that's their shoe-ins, or whatever the case may be. They'll go through the process, and hopefully they get acknowledged for their greatness.
Thanks to everyone who joined us tonight on Track Announcer's Notebook as we paid tribute to Dennis Curtis and Ross Thompson. We'll be back next Monday night. We've got a special guest in Doug Teague, very interesting gentleman who I met decades ago, an outstanding rider, an engineer who works in MotoGP as a technical inspector, but had a great racing career, did a lot of his racing here at what was Mosport at the time. He'll be one of our special guests next Monday night. And then on the 18th, we've got 1972 Daytona 200 champion Don Emdy to talk about Daytona, to talk about his books, and to talk about motorcycle road racing in general. So a couple of great shows coming up in the next couple of weeks. Be safe out there, and we'll see you back here next Monday night for another edition of Track Announcer's Notebook. For my co-host and producer, Stuart Nodell, so long for now, and be well.